Imagine a world where the most lethal poisons were once celebrated as potions capable of saving lives. Drugs have come a long way. Their history is a story of human creativity and danger. Before the development of modern pharmaceuticals, ancient, medieval, and wartime saw different people, from athletes to soldiers in war, consume different drugs with little to no restriction. So how and why were these drugs consumed? And what exactly changed over the years that saw them get used differently and cautiously? Join us as we unravel this interesting evolution of drugs throughout history. The oldest indications of drug use date back to prehistoric times. According to archaeological evidence, psychoactive plants were used by early people as far back as 10,000 years ago. Native American tribes' use of peyote is among the most well-known instances of this. The hallucinogenic substance mescaline, which is found in peyote cacti, was used in religious ceremonies. In ancient Egypt, opium was not only used for medicinal purposes but also for recreation. Similar to Native American tribes, the Egyptians also had a drug they used in religious ceremonies: cannabis. It was incorporated into their spiritual and cultural rituals and used as medicine. Cultural interchange and widening of trade channels saw drug usage increase in popularity during the Middle Ages. In the Middle East and Asia, the use of opium became very common and widespread. Just like in prehistoric times, this drug was used for both medicinal and recreational purposes. It was especially popular in Persia, where it was drunk as madak, a type of beverage. In China and India, both opium and cannabis were used for medicinal purposes. Cannabis was utilized in Ayurvedic medicine in India to treat a wide range of conditions. In China, the drug was used to promote relaxation and ease discomfort and pain. It was also during the medieval times that the use of tobacco became popular. This drug was introduced to Europeans by Americans toward the end of the 15th century. After its introduction, it became very popular and spread rapidly across the continent. Its stimulating and energizing effects were the main reasons for its widespread use. Tobacco was smoked or chewed, and it was believed to have medicinal value. But the widespread use of these drugs in the medieval era wasn't without consequences. Many users developed tobacco and opium addictions that led to health complications. Those who developed drug addictions had a difficult time because drug addiction was condemned and stigmatized. They were excluded from society or even jailed. However, despite these drugs having addiction as a serious concern, they continued to be used. What changed was the legality of these substances. It varied greatly from place to place. Despite still being used for both medicinal and recreational purposes even today, necessary measures were taken to avoid large numbers of addiction and health complication cases. During the First World War, soldiers used mind-altering substances for medicinal and non-therapeutic purposes. These drugs were prescribed by the government, and in different instances, the soldiers prescribed them for themselves. Alcohol, morphine, Snow White, and opioids are some of the mainly used drugs by soldiers in war. These sedative medications helped soldiers relax and lessen the impact the horrors of combat had on them emotionally and mentally. They also helped relieve physical pain. But all this relief these drugs brought came at a cost. When it came to countering and dealing with the pain from wounds sustained in war by soldiers, morphine was the most commonly administered drug. The ghastly wounds picked up by soldiers during the war, from injuries to the kidneys, lungs, and bladder to facial mutilations and ripping of flesh and bones, brought unbearable pain and torment to the soldiers. Torment that could only be countered by the most potent analgesic, morphine sulfate. However, the medics knew how much harm this drug could bring if used without supervision. So, in an effort to prevent cases of overdose, they marked the foreheads of patients with crosses in permanent ink once they had received a dose of morphine. However, for some reason, despite the medics taking as many precautions as they could, they found that soldiers still received doses of the narcotic more than once. Things became even worse when those with heavy injuries took larger amounts to ease the pain. Because of the naturally chaotic atmosphere in the war camps, it was becoming almost impossible to prevent these ordeals from happening. As if things weren't bad enough, the wounded started self-medicating themselves with morphine as they waited to receive further medical care. Now, a morphine overdose brought a lot of negative side effects. However, the most common one that medics struggled to deal with was how the drug blurred the clinical picture and hindered a proper diagnosis. They often struggled with determining whether the soldier's critical condition was because of an excessive intake of morphine or his wounds. With time, the number of soldiers addicted to morphine rapidly increased, a situation that brought a lot of concern and had several physicians consider letting wounded soldiers endure the pain until they reached professional treatment stations. Controlling the use of morphine among soldiers proved to be a great challenge because there wasn't another alternative available with the same effectiveness. Another drug that the soldiers commonly used was Snow White. In addition to being applied locally as an anesthetic, the authorities issued the drug for enhancement purposes. In the event they felt the need for it, soldiers were actually allowed to buy it on their own. It was so commonly used that it's impossible to determine the amount that was consumed by fighting soldiers. Soldiers found their motivation in this drug. It served as a mood enhancer, a source of inner fuel, and it also boosted the morale of soldiers. When they took it, the soldiers could concentrate, reduce stress, and perform better. German fighter pilots took the drug before embarking on long-distance flights. It was a drug that was particularly common among them because of its stimulating effect. The drug helped them combat extreme cold conditions up there. When World War II ended, the use of amphetamines increased among soldiers returning home from the war. Originally, soldiers were prescribed the medication to help them stay focused and awake during extended periods of fighting. However, many soldiers kept on using amphetamines after the war to help them deal with the stress of getting used to normal civilian life. Additionally, several medical conditions such as narcolepsy, depression, and weight loss were treated with amphetamines. Benzedrine and Excedrin were some of the various brand names that sold this drug. But as the popularity of their stimulating effects grew, amphetamines became widely abused. They were consumed by large numbers of people for the purpose of staying alert as well as enhancing school and work performance. In extreme cases, athletes used amphetamines to boost their on-field performance. Because of this widespread abuse, health and social problems developed. Regular users of amphetamines often experienced anxiety, insomnia, and other disturbing side effects. Dependency and addiction to these drugs saw the development of a black market for them. In the 1980s and 1990s, crack cocaine became widely spread and popular in many urban areas of the United States. The drug was processed into crystals and was consumed through smoking. It became a great problem because it was highly addictive. Its users mainly used it as a source of pleasure due to the intense but short-lived high it produced. The drug was also cheap and easily accessible, and this fueled the addiction users had to it. Crack addicts were unable to keep their jobs or maintain relationships, and because of this, there was an economic and social dysfunction in the society. The widespreading and addiction of crack led to violence and crime involving drugs. Drug dealers and rival gangs fought for territory and got into violent altercations. These were events that caused many injuries and claimed lives as innocent bystanders frequently got caught up in the chaos. A rise in homicides and other violent crimes was also recorded. In an effort to deal with the spread of cocaine and the negative effects it brought, law enforcement institutions started cracking down on drug-related crimes and enforced harsher penalties for drug offenses. In the 21st century, the widespread use of opioids became a concern. Opioids are a class of drugs that include prescription painkillers as well as illicit drugs like heroin. Because of the overprescription, opioids caused widespread addiction and death due to overdose. This is a problem that medics and healthcare institutions are still working to eliminate, or at least reduce. Initiatives to educate society about the drugs, as well as efforts to reduce their circulation in the public, were employed and are still being worked on. In the modern world today, drugs are still used for a wide range of purposes. However, because of past experiences and the history between man and drugs, strict measures have been enforced to avoid similar destructive occurrences from happening. From restricting prescription to professionals, reducing the number of drugs in people's possession, to enforcing strict laws on powerful drugs, as well as increasing rehabilitation centers, Society has invested heavily in controlling drugs and substance abuse. The new age has also seen development of new drugs, as well as new uses for existing ones. Health professionals continue to explore the benefits and risks of drug use, as law enforcement institutions work to ensure their use safely.